So now we've moved on to look at some of Lynn's creating related to her Journey project, and she's first showing us black and white portraits made in Asheville, North Carolina. So Lynn, maybe you can tell us a little bit about this work.
Yeah, this goes back to early work. This was this would have been 1995, 94, 95. And these are portraits that I shot on the street in the black business district of Asheville. Now, I used to know everybody's name, but I've forgotten the names of these folks. But these were people that were kind of on the street in Asheville. And that's what I used to do. I used to go into these neighborhoods. I would go into neighborhoods and then I would reach out to the so-called mayor of the street. And then I would, you know, just go in and he would introduce different people, you know, introduce me to different people, and they would allow me to take their photographs. And I think that that's real important that you have, you know, this kind of permission, you know, to photograph before you go in. Like, you just don't go in and shove a camera in the face of people. This guy right here, I do remember him. This is Cecil. And he was just very, very wonderful, very, very sweet man who actually came to the opening whenever we had the opening in Asheville. And so Cecil showed up, and I wound up doing a painted photograph of him. And I have another one of this gentleman who was a bit kind of a sage on the street, and I really enjoyed talking to him. I have other photographs from here because usually when I would go in, I'd shoot, you know, several rolls of film. This is when we were doing film. I'd shoot several rolls of film of people, and yeah. And so these guys, real interesting. These guys, I shot them, just happened to walk down the street, and they were all leaning against this car, and I thought they were really, really wonderful. And
so let's go ahead and move them and pose with the paint image.
So,
and then you can talk a little bit about that process of painting and what you're striving for when you paint a photograph.
So this is the original. This is the original silver gelatin print. This is actually a copy of the original painting. And so what we have here, 4 guys on the street leaning against the cars, and then now we have a painted photograph of these same 4 guys who have now been transformed into guardian angels. And so you have the 4 archangels here. There's a sword, there's a candle. I know this is Michael. I think this is Uriel. I can't remember the other 3. Gabriel was the 3rd one. And anyway, but these are all the angels, the 4 archangels that you often hear. And I always tell students when I show this picture that if you were going to have a guardian angel, you wouldn't want to have, you know, the cute little cherubs with the sweet little wings. Don't do it for me. I think I'd rather have my guardian angels looking like these guys.
Can you talk a little bit about how you began that process of painting on images to create an alternative perspective?
Sure. What happens is, what's most important with me, you know, with going into communities is that I listen. And this series of work, and there were actually 8 pieces in this series of work was from a story that was told to me by a woman from Asheville. Told me the story of her grandmother, or her great-grandmother, who walked from Georgia to the mountains of North Carolina in search of work. And so I created a narrative around that because the story was so compelling that, you know, that people after the end of the Civil War, that, you know, you had this mass migration of people who were just kind of moving and trying to get themselves settled. And so I was just very inspired by the story and created a series of painted photographs that illustrated her journey. And these really were, in that story, these were guardians that kind of helped her along the way. So each of the people that I photographed on the street became a character in this narrative. There was one woman who who I found out, interestingly enough, was Native American, and I wound up, you know, or was of a Native American ancestry, and she wound up helping the ancestor that was trying to get to the mountains, helped her across a stream. And so you had, there was another man who was the man in the moon, who shed light on her path so that she could, you know, walk through her path. So each of the people in the community became characters in the story or in the narrative along this woman's journey. And so, you know, that story was very compelling.
What a beautiful story.
Yeah, well, it's gorgeous.
I hope that maybe we'll be able to read one of your stories at some point in time. I think we'll wrap up here. What wonderful illustrations of inspiration from community and history.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time.
Sure.